Captain Lee Minho gripped the control stick as his cargo hauler screamed through Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Sparks flew from damaged panels, while warning alarms blared throughout the cockpit. The Zephyrian pirates had done their job well. His ship was dying fast. "Come on, old girl," he muttered, fighting to keep the vessel level. "Just get me to the ground in one piece." The crash landing sent him tumbling across the cabin. When the dust settled, Minho crawled out to survey the wreckage. His ship lay twisted and broken, smoke rising from its engines. 3 months of cargo runs, all for nothing. The pirates had taken everything valuable before leaving him to die. Walking back to his ranch settlement felt like a death march. The red sun of Kepler 442b beat down mercilessly as he trudged across the barren landscape. His boots crunched on the crystalline sand that passed for soil on this forsaken world. The ranch looked even worse than when he'd left. The earth cattle he'd brought were lying sick in their pens, their eyes dull and lifeless. The alien parasites were winning the war against his livestock. His crops had withered despite the automated irrigation systems. Nothing from Earth seemed to survive long on this hostile planet. Minho sat on his porch and stared at the account. Balance on his datapad. Barely enough credits left for a week's worth of supplies. His military pension was long gone, invested in this failed dream of starting fresh on the frontier. At 42, he was too old to start over again. The settlement's communication array crackled to life. "Minho, you out there?" came the voice of Park Dong-yun, his nearest neighbor 20 kilometers away. "Yeah, I'm here. Heard about your ship. Bad luck, brother. Listen, there's word in town about some opportunities. Might want to check out the Nebula Saloon tonight. Could be your last chance to turn things around." Minho knew what that meant. The Nebula Saloon was where desperate people made desperate deals, but desperate was exactly what he was. As the twin moons rose, Minho cleaned himself up and headed into New Frontier Town. The settlement was a rough collection of prefab buildings and alien architecture, home to humans, Zephyrians, Vorthans, and a dozen other species trying to make their fortune on the frontier. The Nebula Saloon buzzed with activity. Holographic dancers moved to alien music, while patrons from across the galaxy drank exotic liquors. The air was thick with smoke from various worlds, each species enjoying their preferred intoxicants. Minho ordered a cheap synthetic whiskey and tried to blend into the crowd. That's when he heard the announcement that made his blood freeze. "Ladies, gentlemen and honored beings," called out a tall Vorthan with purple skin and 4 arms. "Tonight, we present a rare opportunity. 3 prime specimens of human females perfect for labor contracts." A cage descended from the ceiling on mechanical chains. Inside were 3 women, clearly human, dressed in simple gray uniforms. Their faces showed defiance mixed with fear. The crowd gathered around like vultures. "First we have Park Jizu," the Vorthan auctioneer continued. "Age 28, specialized in biological sciences. Excellent for agricultural projects or pharmaceutical research." The woman named Jisu stood tall despite her circumstances. Her dark hair was pulled back, revealing intelligent eyes that scanned the crowd with calculating precision. Next, Kim, Nari, age 31, former military engineer with extensive combat experience, perfect for construction projects or security operations. Nari's posture screamed soldier even in captivity. Her muscled frame and alert stance made it clear she was far from broken. Finally, Choi Hana, age 26, medical researcher with advanced degrees in xenobiology. Invaluable for frontier medical facilities. Hana appeared younger than the others, but her steady gaze showed the same inner strength. The bidding started low. Alien merchants and corporate representatives raised their appendages casually, treating the women like equipment. Minho's military training kicked in, analyzing the situation with cold precision. 12 bidders in total. Most looked like small-time operators who would work the women to death. A few corporate types who probably had worse plans. The Vorthan slavers expected maybe 50,000 credits total for all 3. Minho checked his account again. 62,000 credits, everything he had left in the universe. "Do I hear 40,000 for the lot?" called the auctioneer. Hands and claws rose around the room. The price climbed steadily. 50,000, 55. The corporate bidders were getting serious now. Minho's hand shook as he raised it. 60,000. The room went quiet. Every eye turned to the human in the worn flight jacket who'd just bid his life savings on 3 strangers. 62,000, called a Zephyrian, corporate representative. The auctioneer looked around the room. Going once at 62,000? Minho's heart pounded. This was insane. These women were strangers. He had no guarantee they'd even want his help. But something about their defiant stance reminded him of his own military unit, trapped behind enemy lines but never giving up. 62,500, he called out, throwing in his emergency reserve. Going twice. The Zephyrian shook his head and stepped back. No one else moved. Sold to the human for 62,500 credits. As the cage lowered, Minho realized he'd just bought 3 people and bankrupted himself in the process. He had no plan, no backup, and no idea what came next. But for the first time in months, he felt like he'd done something right. The 3 women looked at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion as the Vorthans processed his payment. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. The transport. Hover truck rumbled across the wasteland toward Minho's ranch, carrying its precious cargo. The 3 women sat in tense silence, their restraint collars still active and blinking red. Minho kept glancing in the rearview mirror, seeing the mix of fear and defiance in their eyes. "Listen," he said finally, breaking the awkward quiet. "I know what you're thinking, but things aren't what they seem." Park Jisoo spoke first, her voice steady despite everything. "Save your breath. We've heard every lie slavers tell their new property." "I'm not a slaver," Minho replied. "And you're not property." Kim Nari laughed bitterly. "Right. That's why we're wearing shock collars and heading to your personal ranch." The ranch came into view as they crested a hill. It looked even more pathetic. In the moonlight, failing crops, sick animals, and buildings that needed serious repair. Minho parked near the main house and turned off the engine. "Here's the thing," he said, pulling out the control device for their collars. "I spent every credit I had buying you 3, but not for the reasons you think." He pressed the release button. The collars clicked open and fell away. The women stared at him in shock. Hana was the first to move, rubbing her neck where the collar had chafed. "What's your game?" "No game." Minho climbed out and opened their door. "You're free to go. There's a communication array in the house if you want to call for transport back to town." Jisoo stepped down carefully, ready to run if needed. "This has to be some kind of trick." "No trick." Minho walked to a nearby fire barrel and threw in the ownership contracts. The papers curled and burned, orange flames dancing in the night air. "There. Legally, you never belonged to anyone." The 3 women watched the contracts turn to ash, hardly believing what they were seeing. Nari kept her hands ready for combat, but her stance relaxed slightly. "So what do you want?" she asked. Minho gestured at his failing ranch. "Look around. I'm dying out here. My crops won't grow, my animals are sick, and I'm completely out of money. I need help, but I can't afford to hire anyone." "So you bought slaves instead?" Hana asked, suspicion still clear in her voice. "I bought people who needed rescuing. Turns out we might be able to help each other." He looked at each of them in turn. "Jisoo, you're a xenobotanist. This alien soil is killing everything I plant. Nari, you're a military engineer. This place needs serious fortification if we're going to survive. And Hana, you're a medical researcher. My livestock are dying from local parasites." Jisoo walked over to examine his withered crops. Even in the dim light, her trained eye could see the problems. "The soil chemistry is completely wrong for earth plants, but there might be solutions." "What kind of solutions?" Minho asked. "Symbiotic relationships with local microorganisms, genetic adaptation of existing crops. It's possible, but it would take time and resources." Nari had moved to inspect the ranch's defenses, which were basically non-existent. "This place is wide open. Any raiding party could take it in minutes." "That's what I'm afraid of," Minho admitted. Hana knelt beside one of the sick cattle, observing its symptoms. "These parasites are unlike anything in the Earth database, but every organism has weaknesses." The sound of approaching vehicles made them all turn. 3 hoverbikes crested the hill, their riders clearly Vorthan. The lead bike carried the purple-skinned auctioneer from the Saloon. Lee Minho, the Vorthan called out as they approached. We need to talk. Minho stepped forward, the three women flanking him. Talk about what? The auctioneer dismounted, his forearms gesturing angrily. You cheated. Us? Those contracts were supposed to include breeding rights and organ harvesting clauses. Very valuable additions. I bought them as advertised, Minho replied calmly. Labor contracts, nothing more. The fine print clearly stated additional rights. We demand compensation or the return of our property. Nari stepped forward, her military bearing evident. We're not anyone's property. The Vorthan laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. Human law doesn't apply here, little soldier. Frontier justice is the only law that matters. Then let's talk about frontier justice, Minho said. I paid your price fair and square. The deal is done. Not quite. The auctioneer signaled his companions, who raised energy weapons. You have 24 hours to return our property or pay an additional 50,000 credits. Otherwise, we'll take them by force. The hoverbikes roared away, leaving the four humans alone under the alien stars. Well, Jisoo said dryly, that went well. Nari was already scanning the horizon, her tactical mind working. They'll be back with more firepower. This place is indefensible as it stands. So what do we do? Hana asked. Minho looked at each of them. We dig in and fight, but I can't ask you three to risk your lives for my problems. Your problems? Jisoo laughed. They want to drag us back to that auction block. This is our fight too. Nari nodded grimly. Besides, I've seen enough of the galaxy to know that running just delays the inevitable. Sometimes you have to make a stand. Hana crossed her arms. I didn't survive 4 years in the Outer Rim just to become someone's lab rat. Count me in. As dawn approached, the four humans worked together to prepare for war. Nari directed the construction of defensive barriers using scrap metal and salvaged chip parts. Jisoo began analyzing the local ecosystem for anything that could be weaponized. Hana treated the sick animals while studying the native parasites for potential biological warfare applications. Minho contacted the local authorities, but the response was predictable. Sorry, Minho, came the voice of Sheriff Kim Taiho over the comm. The Vorthans have trading agreements with the Colony Council. We can't interfere in their business practices. They're threatening to attack my property, Minho protested. Your property is noted as abandoned in our records. No official settlement exists at your coordinates. The message was clear. They were on their own. As the red sun rose over Kepler 442b, four humans prepared to face impossible odds. They had no money, limited weapons, and enemies with superior technology. But they had something the Vorthans didn't understand. The human refusal to surrender when backed into a corner. The siege of Minho's ranch was about to begin. The 24-hour deadline was ticking away fast. Jisoo worked frantically in the makeshift laboratory she'd set up in Minho's kitchen, mixing samples of alien soil with bacterial cultures from Earth food supplies. Her microscope flickered as she examined the results. This is incredible, she muttered, adjusting the focus. The local fungi aren't just compatible with Earth bacteria, they're forming symbiotic relationships. Minho looked over her shoulder at the swirling patterns on the screen. What does that mean for us? It means your soil can be fixed, but more importantly, Jisoo grinned as she pointed to another sample. These hybrid organisms produce toxins that are harmless to humans, but deadly to Vorthan physiology. Meanwhile, Nari had turned the ranch into a construction zone. She'd salvaged the navigation array from Minho's crashed ship and was wiring it into a network of motion sensors made from old farming equipment. Sparks flew as she connected power cables to the main generator. Hana, I need those chemical compounds. Ready in 30 minutes, she called out, while installing a jury-rigged plasma capacitor behind the barn. Hana was elbow-deep in the medical bay she'd improvised from Minho's storage room. Local plants covered every surface as she processed them through a portable distillation unit. The sick cattle outside were already showing improvement from her first batch of treatments. The indigenous moss contains natural antibiotics, she explained, crushing purple leaves into a paste. But when I combine it with certain earth minerals, it becomes something much more interesting. How interesting? Minho asked, helping her strain the mixture. Let's just say the Vorthans are going to have a very bad day if they breathe this stuff. The sound of approaching engines made them all freeze. Through the windows, they could see dust clouds on the horizon, multiple vehicles heading their way. "They're early," Nari growled, checking her improvised weapon systems. "I count 8 hover bikes and 2 assault craft." Minho grabbed his old military rifle from the closet. "That's at least 20 Vorthans. We're outnumbered 5-1. "Numbers don't matter if you fight smart," Nari replied, activating her defensive network. Hidden speakers around the ranch crackled to life, broadcasting false radio chatter to confuse enemy targeting systems. The Vorthan assault began with typical alien arrogance. Their lead vehicle, a sleek combat speeder, roared directly toward the main house with energy cannons blazing. The pilot expected to find cowering humans hiding behind furniture. Instead, he flew straight into Nari's trap. The modified navigation array locked onto the speeder's propulsion system and fired a concentrated electromagnetic pulse. The alien craft's engines died instantly, sending it crashing into the barn in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. "First blood to us," Nari announced, already redirecting power to her next surprise. The remaining Vorthans spread out, trying to surround the ranch. But Jisu's biological warfare was ready for them. Hidden sprinkler systems activated around the perimeter, releasing clouds of her hybrid bacteria into the air. The first Vorthan to enter the contaminated zone started convulsing within seconds. His purple skin turned green as the modified organisms attacked his respiratory system. His squadmates tried to help, but touching the infected alien only spread the biological agent faster. "What kind of sorcery is this?" the auctioneer screamed over his communication system. "Human sorcery," Minho replied, having tapped into their frequency. "You wanted to see what humans could do under pressure." 3 more hoverbikes charged the eastern flank, their riders firing plasma bolts that scorched the ground. But Hana's preparations turned even this assault into a disaster for the attackers. The landing zone was saturated with her weaponized plant compounds. As the plasma fire ignited the treated soil, toxic smoke billowed up in thick clouds. The Vorthan riders couldn't see through the haze, and breathing it sent them into coughing fits that left them helpless. Nari's second trap activated as the remaining assault craft tried to strafe the house. Salvaged ship parts buried around the property suddenly came alive, creating a localized electromagnetic storm that scrambled the craft's navigation systems. The pilot fought for control as his instruments went crazy, but gravity won the battle. The assault craft plowed into the ground, its occupants stumbling out dazed and disoriented. "Impossible!" the auctioneer shouted as his forces fell apart around him. "Humans don't have this kind of technology." "You're right," Minho called back. "We have something better. We have imagination." The final phase of the battle showcased human adaptability at its finest. While the Vorthans tried to regroup with their remaining forces, the 4 humans coordinated like a well-oiled machine. Jisu released a second wave of biological agents, these ones designed to corrode Vorthan equipment. Energy weapons began sparking and failing as the enhanced bacteria ate through their power cells. Nari activated her piece de resistance, a communications jamming field created from household electronics and farming equipment. The Vorthan command structure collapsed as their forces lost contact with each other. Hana's medical expertise became psychological warfare as she broadcasted detailed descriptions of what her compounds were doing to Vorthan biology. The demoralized aliens began retreating before they even engaged. The auctioneer himself made one last desperate charge toward the house, dual energy pistols blazing. But he ran straight into Minho's final surprise, a pit trap covered with camouflaged solar panels. As the purple-skinned alien tumbled into the hole, Minho looked down at him with grim satisfaction. "You wanted to own humans. Here's a lesson about what we do to slavers." The surviving Vorthans fled in panic, their superior technology useless against human ingenuity. What should have been a quick raid to reclaim property had turned into a complete rout. Standing among the wreckage of the enemy force, the 4 humans surveyed their victory. Broken alien technology littered the ground. Toxic smoke still rose from Hana's chemical traps, and Jisu's biological agents continued eating through abandoned equipment. "Well," Jisu said, wiping sweat from her forehead, "that was educational." Nari grinned as she powered down her improvised weapons systems. "I've never seen aliens run that fast." Hana was already collecting samples from the defeated attackers. "This biological data will be invaluable for future defenses." Minho looked at his three partners with new respect. In less than 24 hours, they'd transformed his failing ranch into an impregnable fortress using nothing but scrap metal, kitchen supplies, and human creativity. The Vorthans had learned a hard lesson about underestimating humanity, but this was just the beginning of their story. The Vorthans weren't finished. Word of their humiliating defeat spread quickly through the alien underworld, and their reputation as feared slavers was crumbling. By dawn of the second day, reinforcements arrived. 3 full assault cruisers loaded with veteran soldiers and heavy weapons. "They're not playing games anymore," Nari observed through her improvised periscope, watching the alien ships establish a perimeter around the ranch. "Those are military-grade vessels with orbital bombardment capability," Minho counted. "At least 60 hostiles setting up siege positions. They could level this place from orbit. Why aren't they?" "Because dead slaves are worthless," Jisoo replied grimly. "They still want us alive." The second assault began with psychological warfare. Massive speakers on the Vorthan cruisers blared, threatening messages in broken human languages, while holographic projectors showed gruesome images of what happened to defiant slaves. But the 4 humans had spent the night preparing new surprises. Hana's biological weapons had evolved overnight. The airborne pathogens now included delayed action compounds that looked harmless but activated when exposed to Vorthan adrenaline. As the alien soldiers got excited for battle, their own biochemistry turned against them. The first wave of attackers charged across the open ground with confidence, their environmental suits protecting them from the previous day's biological agents. But these new compounds penetrated their filters through microscopic spores that Jisoo had engineered from local fungal networks. Within minutes, purple-skinned warriors were collapsing in convulsions as their nervous systems overloaded. The sight of their comrades writhing in agony broke the morale of the second wave before they even began their assault. "Retreat, retreat," came panicked voices over the Vortan communication channels that Nari had learned to decrypt. But the humans weren't done demonstrating their ingenuity. Nari had spent the night connecting her electromagnetic pulse system to the ranch's geothermal power source. When the alien cruisers tried to provide orbital support, she unleashed an energy surge that reached into the upper atmosphere. The lead cruiser's shields flickered and died as every electronic system aboard suffered cascading failures. Warning. Lights flashed across alien control panels as the mighty warship began an uncontrolled descent toward the planet's surface. "Impossible!" screamed the Vorthan fleet commander. "How are primitive humans generating this much power?" "We're not primitive," Minho broadcast back. "We're creative." The crashing cruiser created a spectacular fireworks display as it impacted 3 kilometers from the ranch. The explosion sent shockwaves across the landscape and served as a clear message to any other aliens thinking about attacking humans. By the third day, the siege had turned into something completely different. Instead of Vorthans attacking the ranch, human ships were arriving from across the frontier sector. The first to land was a battered transport carrying the Cho family from the mining colony on Kepler 186F. Behind them came mechanics, farmers, doctors and engineers who had heard impossible stories about 4 humans defeating alien slavers. "Is it true?" asked Cho Sungmin as he stepped off his ship with his wife and 2 children. "Did you really bring down a Vorthan cruiser with farm equipment?" Nari grinned, gesturing at the smoking crater on the horizon. "See for yourself. More." Ships arrived hourly. The Kim family brought hydroponic equipment from their failed agricultural station. The Park brothers arrived with salvaged mining machinery and weapons. Dr. Yang Sora came with medical supplies and 3 cargo containers, full of earth seeds. Jisoo's agricultural innovations became the foundation of something much larger than anyone had imagined. Her hybrid bacteria not only fixed the alien soil, but created the most fertile farmland anyone had seen on a frontier world. "Look at this," she said excitedly, showing newcomers the test plots around the ranch. Earth vegetables grew alongside, alien fruits in impossible abundance. The hybrid ecosystem produced crops that were more nutritious and disease-resistant than anything from either world alone. The sick cattle had not only recovered under Hana's treatments, but were thriving in ways that amazed xenobiologists. The animals were adapting to local conditions while maintaining their Earth genetics, creating hybrid livestock perfectly suited for frontier life. "This changes everything," Dr. Yang observed, examining Hana's medical data. "These treatments could revolutionize frontier medicine across the galaxy." Nari's defensive innovations attracted attention from human military advisors across the sector. Her improvised weapon systems, built from scrap and salvage, outperformed expensive alien technology through clever engineering and human intuition. "The beauty of these systems," she explained to a group of fascinated engineers, "is that they can be built anywhere with local materials. No need for expensive imports or alien suppliers." Within weeks, what had been Minho's failing ranch transformed into New Eden Colony, a thriving settlement that showcased everything humans could accomplish when they worked together. The communications center buzzed with activity as families coordinated arrivals from dozens of worlds. The workshop areas rang with the sounds of construction as new buildings rose to house the growing population. Children played in gardens where earth and alien plants grew in harmony. But the most important change was psychological. For too long, human colonists had felt like second-class citizens in alien space, dependent on others for technology and protection. New Eden proved that humans didn't need alien approval to prosper. "We're not trying to copy what aliens do," Minho explained to a delegation of human colonial representatives who came to study their success. "We're doing what humans have always done, adapting, innovating, and building something better." The we. Vortans made one final attempt to reassert their authority, sending diplomatic protests to colonial governments about illegal human weapons and violations of interspecies agreements. The response from New Eden was simple: a broadcast showing happy human families working in abundant fields, protected by defenses built from their own ingenuity, thriving without any need for alien permission or assistance. News networks across human space picked up the story. New Eden, proof that humanity's future is in our own hands, became a rallying cry for independence movements on dozens of worlds. The ranch that had been dying just days before was now the symbol of human resilience across the galaxy. And it all started with 4 people who refused to accept that humans were anyone's property. The real victory wasn't defeating the Vortans. It was proving that humans could build something amazing when they believed in themselves and each other. 5. Years had passed since the siege that changed everything. Captain Lee Minho stood on the observation deck of the New Eden orbital station, watching cargo ships from across the galaxy dock at their trading ports. What had started as a failing ranch was now the economic heart of the entire frontier sector. "The Zephyrian Trade Council is requesting another meeting," announced his assistant Kim Jun-soo, holding a datapad filled with diplomatic messages. "They want to discuss expanding agricultural imports." Minho smiled, remembering when those same Zephyrians had dismissed humans as primitive farmers. Now they were begging to buy New Eden's revolutionary crops that grew in any soil and resisted every known disease. Below them, the colony sprawled across the landscape like a living organism. Gleaming towers housed research facilities where scientists from dozens of species worked alongside human innovators. The agricultural zones stretched to the horizon, their hybrid crops feeding not just New Eden but 17 other worlds. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" Minho asked. "They've officially recognized New Eden as an independent human sovereignty," Jun-soo replied with satisfaction. "Full diplomatic status and trade rights. The ambassador from Centauri Prime called it humanity's coming-of-age moment." The door chimed as Park Jisoo entered, her agricultural council robes flowing as she walked. She looked nothing like the frightened woman from the auction 5 years ago. Now she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had revolutionized farming across known space. "The harvest reports are in," she announced happily. "Production is up another 12% this quarter. The hybrid grains are adapting to new worlds faster than we predicted." Through the viewport, they could see massive cargo haulers loading containers of New Eden crops, Each shipment carried not just food, but proof that human innovation could solve problems that had stumped alien scientists for generations. The university wants to expand the xenobotany program again, Jisoo continued. We're getting applications from students across the galaxy. Apparently, studying human agricultural methods is now considered essential for any serious botanist. Kim Nari's voice crackled over the communication system. Minho, we've got incoming. 3 Vorthan diplomatic vessels requesting permission to dock. Vorthans? Minho raised an eyebrow. The same species that tried to enslave us? Different clan, Nari replied. They're here to formally apologize and discuss purchasing our defensive technologies. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same aliens who had once threatened to take humans by force were now paying premium prices for human-designed security systems. Nari's improvised defenses had evolved into the most sought-after protection technology in the galaxy. Grant them docking permission, Minho decided, but keep our own security active. Already done. The new orbital defense grid is online and running beautifully. Choi Hana arrived as they were discussing the Vorthan visit, her medical research, uniform replaced by the elegant robes of the Medical Institute director. She carried herself with the poise of someone who had just received her 3rd Galactic Medicine Award in 5 years. Perfect timing, she said with a grin. I just finished the presentation for the Interspecies Medical Conference, our hybrid. Treatments are being adopted by healthcare systems on 43 worlds now. 43? Jisoo whistled in amazement. When did medicine become so popular? When people realized that human doctors were curing diseases that alien physicians had given up on. Hana replied proudly. Turns out, our approach of combining traditional Earth medicine with alien biotechnology creates solutions nobody else thought of. The communication system activated again with an urgent message. New Eden Control. This is the human transport vessel Daegu's Dream requesting emergency docking. We have refugees from the Proxima incident. Minho's expression grew serious. How? Many refugees? 237 humans, sir. They lost everything when the Krillian Corporation seized their mining rights. Grant them priority docking, Minho ordered immediately. Prepare the welcome centers and contact the housing authority. This had become routine over the years. When humans faced oppression or exploitation anywhere in the galaxy, they looked to New Eden as a place of refuge and opportunity. The colony had grown from 4 desperate people to over 50,000 residents with new arrivals every day. I'll coordinate the medical screening, Hana volunteered. Some of these refugees might need immediate treatment. And I'll check our agricultural capacity, Jisoo added. We'll need to expand food production to support the new population. Security assessment is already underway, Nari reported. We'll make sure they're genuine refugees and not infiltrators. Watching his 3 partners spring into action, Minho felt a deep sense of pride. They had built something that went far beyond personal success. New Eden had become a symbol of human potential that inspired colonists across the galaxy. The Vorthan diplomatic ships docked at the designated port, their purple-skinned occupants emerging with obvious nervousness. It was a far cry from their ancestors' arrogant demands 5 years ago. Honored humans, their leader began with deep bows. We come seeking forgiveness for our past actions and hoping to learn from your wisdom. The transformation was complete. The species that had once tried to auction humans as property now treated them as teachers and partners. It was a victory that went beyond any military conquest. That evening, the 4 founders of New Eden gathered in Minho's private quarters for their weekly dinner. The conversation flowed easily between old friends who had shared impossible challenges and emerged stronger. Remember when our biggest worry was sick cattle? Minho laughed, raising his glass. And now we're advising the Galactic Agricultural Commission, Jisoo replied, clinking glasses with him. From building traps with scrap metal to designing the galaxy's most advanced defense systems, Nari added with a smile. From treating parasites in livestock to revolutionizing interspecies medicine, Hana finished. They sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the bustling colony they had created. Ships from dozens of worlds waited in orbit to trade with New Eden. Human families walked safely through streets that had once been hostile wasteland, Children played in parks where alien and Earth plants grew in harmony. The transformation had rippled far beyond their single world. Across human space, colonies were adopting New Eden's techniques and philosophy. The Human Colonial Alliance had formed, uniting settlements that followed their example of independence and innovation. "You know what the best part is?" Minho said. "Finally, what's that?" Hana asked. "We proved that being human isn't about having the best technology or the strongest weapons. It's about refusing to give up, taking care of each other and finding solutions nobody else thought of." As the twin moons rose over New Eden Colony, 4 friends who had once been strangers in a slave auction raised their glasses in a final toast. They had taken humanity's darkest moment and turned it into its brightest victory. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. The end.